We're coming up on the top of the hour, so I think we'll get started. And since there's there are not many people here, so I would say the participants in the room can go ahead and turn their cameras on if they would like to. Please stay on mute unless you're asking a question. But I would say let's just make it more intimate by just showing your camera. I know it's early in the morning, you may not want to be seen this early, but let's go ahead and do that. So today, this is an informal drop-in session to share information with you about the landing project, something we're very, very excited about here, and the potential impact that it holds for the Earth and space science community. The format for this is, again, we have the four of the co-PIs here, myself, Margaret Pernodi, Stephanie Goodwin, and we're here to answer any question you might have, but the setup will be this. We have a brief presentation. Margaret's gonna walk through just a set of slides of 5 or 6, there's not very many, just to give you an overview of what landing is. And then once she does that, we'll open it up for Q&A, or you can write questions in the chat box at any time, but we'll come back and make sure we answer your questions. And since this is a drop-in session, it's not intended to be, we're going to give you 1 hour of information. We could give you 1 hour of information, but we're not going to try to do that today. What we'll do is we'll have Margaret walk through the presentation in a few minutes, go to Q&A, answer questions people might have, and then repeat that process starting at about 8:30 or at 30 past hour or 8:35. So Margaret will make a presentation. We'll open it up to Q&A, keep it going, and then if you care to leave for the second round, that's fine. But then we'll do a repeat cycle of this starting at about 8:30, 8:35. So again, so at this point. Let me just turn it over to, so do you guys, let's introduce yourselves. So Margaret, then Pernodi, then Stephanie, introduce yourselves, okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Billy. Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm Margaret Frazier. I'm the new Director of Diversity and Inclusion at AGU.
Pernodi?
Hi, I'm Pranoti Asher. I'm the Assistant Director for Grants and Education Programs at AGU and the Project Director for the AGU Bridge Program.
Okay, and Stephanie?
I'm Stephanie Goodwin. I'm the President of Inclusion Works, DEI consultant working primarily in academic and STEM spaces. And I'm very excited to be a co-PI on this project.
Okay, thank you. And I'm Billy Williams, VP for Ethics, Diversity, and Inclusion at AGU. So with that, let's just turn it over to Margaret just to walk through a high-level overview, and then we'll open it up for Q&A.
Okay, super. Just give me a thumbs up if you can see this. Okay, awesome, thank you. And I'm gonna put the thing down here so you guys can see. All right, thank you. So again, I'm Margaret. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm going to be speaking on behalf of Billy, Pernodi, and Stephanie about a new initiative that we have. So I'm going to wait until this goes forward. Let's see. All right. So I first want to just reiterate how important DE&I is to AGU. So 2 documents codify and underpin AGU's commitment to anti-racism and JEDI issues. We have a diversity and inclusion strategic plan that was adopted in 2018 with the vision that diversity and inclusion are recognized and celebrated as being essential for the success of AGU, its members, and the global Earth and space science enterprise. And AGU's values are also reflected in our new strategic plan, one of the 3 goals being to promote and exemplify an inclusive scientific culture. So our newest initiative, DEI initiative, is called AGU Landing, which is the letters stand for Landing Academy and Network for Diversity and Inclusion in the Geosciences. We recently received funding from the National Science Foundation for a Gold N Award. So Geosciences Opportunity for Leadership, Diversity, Expanding the Network. And the co-PIs are the 4 of us that have been introduced so far: Billy Williams, Stephanie Stephanie Goodwin, Pranoti Asher, and me. And so we proposed a project to address that white men overwhelmingly dominate the geosciences. And even though there have been decades of investment and research, geosciences remain the least diverse STEM field due to foundational, cultural, and institutionalized barriers. And we argued that in order for there to be institutional and organizational and cultural change, there needed to be intention and resources and recognition involved in any process. So Landing is a learning community and a training academy to create DE&I champions who will shift geosciences toward a culture of inclusivity. And there are two parts. So the first part is a community of practice that will cultivate future champions and build networks. And then the second part is an academy that will provide professional development for DE&I champions who are already poised to affect change in the geosciences. So I want to go over just a little bit about each of these two aspects, and then we would be happy to answer any questions that you have. So the community of practice is intended to build and sustain DE&I capacity at scale. There are going to be curated resources like toolkits. There will be webinars on this in this community of practice that's going to be kept on our webpage. There will be networking tools, and we plan on launching what seems like pretty quickly for us in spring 2021. And then I've down here on several of the slides, I have the Ethics and Equity website with the landing page. And then we have our own email address here. So landing@agu.org, in case you've got any questions that you think of after this session. So that's the community of practice. And then the other section or portion of the landing project is the academy. And the academy will be a cohort-based, facilitated by DE&I leaders, and it's going to be at 2-year cohorts comprised of evidence-based professional development in DE&I science, leadership, and action. We plan on a really excellent group of DE&I leaders and experts on these issues. The peer mentoring is going to be a big aspect of the academy. Members of the cohorts will be able to share their expertise and build and strengthen their networks. And then the third aspect of the academy is going to be a broadening participation project where participants will be able to apply their knowledge and skills and awareness that they get from the community of practice and all of the webinars and development in the academy to any issues that they have in their home institution. And we are just really lucky to have such an esteemed group of people sharing this vision with us and helping us with these this new project and this initiative. So I'm not going to read all of the tiny print here, but this is our steering committee. So Billy, me, Pranoti, where's Stephanie? There you are, Stephanie. Of course, Stephanie here. And then we've also got Coeli Dutt, Corey Garza, Erica Marin Spiata, and Brooke Hansen on our steering committee, who will help lead and coordinate the strategic planning and contribute their expertise to planning the landing program. We are also thrilled with the members of our advisory board. These are the people who have agreed and committed to the landing project at the time of the proposal. We're so happy to have them on board. They come from a range of disciplines and institutions and backgrounds and expertise, and they will be a vital part of making sure that landing is as great as it can be. And so our vision for landing is that we really think that AGU landing can have high impact. One difference between AGU landing and other initiatives is that this is focused for geosciences. It's really targeted for the geosciences, and there will be several scholars every year. So that's what we we are hoping what we consider high impact. We think this is going to be sustainable into the future. The community of practice is going to live on the internet. And we have, as you saw in the steering committee and the advisory group, we have really broad partnerships and involvements from all sectors and all disciplines. And we think that at the end of our 4-year, well, not just at the end, but as we're developing this and as we go forward with landing, we think this can be a model across STEM for culture change. And then lastly, just some dates in case you're interested in landing in either the community of practice or in the academy. So in the spring, this is when we are going to launch the community of practice, and we're going to put out a public call for landing academy participants. So please check that out. Keep checking the ethics and equity website. We can put that in the chat. And then in the summer, June 15th, we are anticipating as our application deadline. And then by the end of August, we want to notify the Cohort 1 participants. We're going to make a public announcement of Cohort 1. This is going to be it's quite a big deal to develop these leaders to go on and lead the charge for positive culture change. And so we'll publicly announce you and make you famous. And then Cohort 1 is going to meet at AGU Fall Meeting 2021. So that is the short bit of information that we wanted to present on AGU Landing today. So I'm going to stop sharing and come back. And I know that the co-PIs and a lot of you are in the advisory group and on the steering committee will have lots of things to add. So let's hear your questions.
Yeah. So thank you, Margaret, for that great summary. So any of you who have questions, you can please come on camera. You can come on camera anyway. I would recommend you do that. Come on camera and ask your question. Also, you can place questions in the chat box, and we'll get to those. But before I allow Stephanie or Pranoti to say anything they might want to add before we go to Q&A, let me just add about this vision. So our vision for this is bigger than what the money that we have currently from NSF. For example, we want to allow the cohorts to have funding to support their project. So each cohort member is expected to have a project to help pursue the broader impacts. So we want to have funding to help support those. So we're working behind the scenes to try to get additional funds to help support those type activities. We also view this as going forward in the future. Right now, it's under NSF funding. And so we're thinking about how do you get international participants into a program that's NSF funded. So we had additional funding, we could look at additional expansion as well. I think the third big item, and I think some of you will have these questions off the top, is, well, how many people will you have in your cohort? Well, currently the funding for the project is that in the first cohort will be 9 participants, and the second cohort will be another 9. So there's the current program setup is set to take 18 people through the program over the next 3 years. Our vision is that this will be at least double that. So we're working again to make it bigger, stronger, more impactful behind the scenes. And we're still working through the details on, okay, what's the application process? What's the curriculum look like? So those are the things that we're still working through. Let me just stop there and let Pranoti or Stephanie say anything else before we throw it open.
I have nothing to add. You both said it all.
Stephanie?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. I mean, I think the only thing I would just really emphasize is that one of the aspects of this program that is so unique is that focus on the needs within the geosciences. There are a number of large-scale efforts around the United States to address issues about equity in STEM, but oftentimes they're focused at a level of analysis that doesn't necessarily translate well for specific disciplines. I think the other unique thing here is that the scalability and sustainability that's associated with working through a professional organization like AGU that has a broad and strong history of supporting professional development for its membership. That's also a very unique aspect of this work. And so I think it's going to give it legs in a way that other programs may not have been able to build those legs.
Yeah. So I see a question from Catalina. Catalina, you want to just verbalize that, or rather than me read it?
Sure. So I assume, amplification is a big part of how you see impact. And so I'm interested to know what sort of projects you anticipate the cohorts taking on to amplify the impact beyond the actual fellows.
So I can take that, or one of you can. So the way we envision the Academy developing is that in the first year of participation, we will provide the foundational knowledge that leaders need to identify the needs within their organization and identify potential solutions and strategies for addressing those needs. And so they'll be idiosyncratic in the sense that any one participant's needs at their organization may be quite different from any other individual's needs. But they may target on issues of climate within their departments. They may target on issues of recruitment. They may target on other kinds of issues and needs. What we plan to do is give people enough breadth of knowledge and breadth of understanding of evidence-based models that they can pick and choose and identify potential partners to support doing the work that's specifically needed within their own institutions. Now, some people might choose to do something at a higher level of analysis, and in part that will depend on where their own focus is and where their institution support may be for doing the work.
Yeah, and just to build on that, we will not dictate what those projects will be. It will be the participants will. We can suggest some things that they can consider. For example, yesterday we had a session on the Sea Change program and the options for departments to get involved with that and go through that process to raise their profile in diversity, equity, inclusion. So that's an example of something that someone could propose. We know that would be a big deal, but again, and I think also in some cases, some of the participants might join together with someone else, with another participant, to help launch or lead some activities. So we will leave it up to the cohorts with some guidance, with some input, with lots of support. And I think this first cohort is going to be interesting to see how that evolves. And I think that's another advantage of starting off with a manageable number in the first cohort versus trying to go big from the beginning.
I have a question. This is Hendrata.
Go ahead, Hendrata.
Hey, everybody. So my question is how, this is a great program. I think it's fantastic that this is going to be happening and it's going to potentially impact the community a great deal. But one of the things that I wonder is, given the nature of how previous initiatives have turned out, which is basically there's been a lot of money and resources infused, but we don't really see practical, any concrete shifts. There is some, but not at the magnitude that you would think given the resources invested. How do you plan to measure success? Like, how would you evaluate that the program has been successful? Is it graduating the cohort? Is it what? I don't know.
That's an excellent question. And I think we are still sort of thinking through all of the possible ways that we can think about impact. It's difficult to measure distal impact in any project, right? So I've worked in the advanced community for well over 10 years at this point, and any one advanced project, for example, tries to look at shifts in recruiting and retention within an institution. And we know now from 20 years of research on those projects that it can take 10 to 12 years before you see a shift within the institution that's a measurable shift in recruiting and retention. I think what we have to do is try to think about how are we broadening the capacity for doing DEI work and really one of the challenges is if you can infuse the knowledge and experience into leadership, that knowledge and experience can have a broader impact, whatever organization people are working in. And so, one of the things we'll have to do is find a way to capture the outcomes for the individual projects, but we'll also have to find ways to capture how movement of people impacts the spread and impact of these programs. I know that there's an individual working at Northeastern right now who is working on how the advanced community, how people within the advanced community, for example, have moved from one institution to the next, and how that social network shifting has changed the spread of information and tools and understanding of how to make change happen. So I think those are good questions. So
yeah. So Kimberly Lau, you want to go online and ask your question, or want us to read it?
Hi, good morning. I was really interested in the whole program, but I think specifically I was interested in more details about the virtual platform of resources that you were mentioning. Could you speak more about the platform for networking and peer mentoring, and also in general what the timeline might be for when they'd be available for the broader community?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are some things that we're still working through the details on exactly what it would look like, but we have some experts working behind the scene to design not only the platform, but we don't want it to just be a platform, a static platform with some stuff that you just go find what you need. We want to have a stronger engagement component. We want the community practice to build this out. We want there to be some mechanisms for the interface rather than just a one-way interface with the platform. From a timeline standpoint, and I'll invite the other panelists to say more about this, from a timeline standpoint, we are working now to identify, we've gone through a preliminary design process for what it would look like, but we're just now starting the process of identifying the resources that will be there, setting up the program content, and we think we are targeting certainly by the end of the first quarter to have enough materials there that we can start inviting people in to start the engagement. I just want to also say that, again, beyond the steering team has been involved with these discussions already. We have an advisory group, some of them are on the line today, that will help us, decide our metrics, help us further refine our community of practice, help us define the criteria for selection, all those things that are so critical to launching and being successful in the beginning. We're still in early stages, but again, if any of you have input on things we should consider, we will welcome that input for any of the people here on the panel or anyone you saw listed in the steering guard advisory committee as well. So the best I can say, Kimberly, is stay tuned, but check back with us or look for stuff towards the end of the first quarter on the community of practice. I know that's optimistic, and when it first rolls out, we just want it to be enough to keep the engagement and have the connections made, but it will build from there.
Sure, thank you. I see from Stephanie, she asked if I had specific thoughts or suggestions, and maybe I'll just put a little plug in. Myself and a few colleagues were starting a group for Asian American and Pacific Islanders in the Geosciences. And one of the things we were looking for is maybe something a little bit beyond just AGU Connect, where it would be more of a platform for networking and mentoring. And so if there's an opportunity for us to maybe, I don't know, give feedback early on since we're thinking about this, we're happy to chat more.
That's great, Kim. I think I saw some
Awesome.
communications between your group and Lisa and Pranoti earlier in the week, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
And if I can just say, I think that what Billy just said, I'm looking at Jill Karsten's comment in the chat as well about leveraging the gold awardees, and absolutely. And Jill, that's why one reason we're really happy to have you on the advisory group. We are still in the really early stages right now. I think we started on September 1st, but we very much welcome any input and any advice that you may have. There you are.
I just wanted to add a comment partly in response to Billy's answer to Hendrada, because about sort of what the measure of success is, because the origins of the GOLD program was fairly unique at NSF, because it was not only trying to move the needle with regard to DEI in the geosciences, but it also was getting at this question of doing research on how you develop leaders in this space, because all the investments of prior years to try to improve diversity in the geosciences had really demonstrated that a lot of the successful projects were successful because there was a dedicated, committed, informed person at the helm. And so we thought that if we could figure out the secret sauce for trying to increase the number of people with that desire and skill set, that we could actually begin to see in the aggregate more impact instead of these one-off projects. So that sort of research on leadership development is, sort of inherent as part of your measure of success in this project as well, at the scale-up level, basically.
Yeah, I love that, Jill, and that leads into, I think I saw a question here. Let me go back and find it. It may have been from Sabine. About who are we targeting for participants? Is it students? Is it early career? What is? So that's been a discussion with the steering team. And when we envisioned and proposed a project, it was that the cohorts were going to be, at least in initial rounds, were going to be people who were in a position that they went through this program. They are in a position to make impacts, to lead and make something really strong happen. And our initial thinking was that's probably not the students and might not be the early career. We don't know. Certainly, our initial thinking is that we have to be careful that our cohorts going through can take their learning here and really advance and push the needle wherever they are. But we're starting to rethink on what that looks like, because we've come across a lot of graduate students, even and postdocs, who are really out there and making changes phenomenal and leading phenomenal change. So I think that's the discussion we're going to have as we look at the criteria for selection and be very thoughtful about what that mix should be, especially in the early stages. We know in the later stages, once we get rolling, we'll have the opportunity to bring others in at broader backgrounds. But the other portion of this is that there's a mentorship portion of this as well, in terms of expectations of what the folks on the coming out the other end as the champions will lead back in for the next round of participants. So I may not have articulated that well, Sabine, but that's the concept right now. We want to make sure we have this good balance of broad diversity, but also people who are in the program in the early stage. We know, either based on their track record or based on their position or based on what they're ready to do at their own institution, that they can make impact. And I think that's going to be critical as we set up the criteria for selection.
Thanks, Billy. That did answer my question. And I think this sounds like a really exciting program. So congratulations to all of you who put it together.
Thank you.
So Christy has a question, has her hand raised.
Oh, hi, Christy.
Good morning, everybody.
It's early out there.
It is. I was a little late because I was still trying to get some coffee made and sit down. Thank you so much for organizing this session and for this exciting initiative that you're kicking off. I'm really excited about it. It sounds, from everything I've heard, to be great. I'm a new leader in my academic unit for justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and am tasked with developing a strategic plan. And I'm, someone who has, a background in science, and the, challenges we all face is now trying to draw on considerable expertise in these areas, but not ones that we had, our individuals like myself have been doing work on. And so this kind of program is something that just seems extraordinarily attractive to someone like myself who's trying to make, kind of that movement in my institution, but has that without having that personal background. and I want to make sure I'm drawing on the right work and that I'm really going about it in the most effective way possible. One of the challenges that I'm having is that my institution, right, they're saying we're putting a budget on this for the first time. We're giving a leadership position to this for the first time. We expect results and we expect something like tomorrow, right? Mm-hmm. And how do so I'm curious about what the thoughts you have about how to, present the program to institutions and talk to them about the benefits of it. And also kind of like what kind of timeline, someone might be engaged with the program and be able to kind of talk to their institution about making some progress or some change. Because really that's one of the things that has been sort of a challenge for me.
Stephanie, you want to answer that one?
Well, so first of all, it makes me feel good to know that you're hearing what we're hoping this will do, and that is that we will be able to complement your existing skill set with the kinds of things that social scientists do for their day job, right? There are other people for whom that is the focus of their professional development, and what we're hoping to do is give you those skills and give you that knowledge. In terms of what is the timeline for implementing projects or impact from participation in the program, as I said before, we're envisioning that the first year of participation in the academy is really skill building and analysis. So in the first year, your organization would gain introspective awareness, if you will, of potentially hidden or invisible challenges, and we would be helping you identify areas of need. So we would be helping you develop skills to assess the kinds of issues that really might be at the root of your challenges in your institution. In the second year, we would be supporting you along with your peer mentor cohort in implementing strategies to address that. So, in the first year, you would gain knowledge of the issues, and in the second year, you would hopefully begin to gain traction on the solutions. Of course, whatever the challenges are can vary in magnitude and need. And so knowing how long you will see, long-term change would depend on the challenge. Some issues are pretty straightforward. People don't understand something and you need to bring awareness forward. Sometimes you need to bring new pedagogical strategies forward to support equity in your classrooms. Sometimes you need to bring issues forward about hiring or recruiting or retention. Those things can be more difficult to address and take more time. And so it really depends on the issue.
Excellent. That sounds wonderful. And I agree. One of the big challenges also is for us that as I looked at some different mechanisms to have site visits and think other mechanisms to do assessment in the DEI area for my unit. And there's really actually very few outside groups that I've been able to find to help assist me as someone who's not a social scientist with the best way to kind of do that kind of evaluative work. And there seems to be more in astronomy, astrophysics, physics than there is in sort of the geo space. And so I'm really excited to hear about that part of the program as well. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, you're right. Physics and astrophysics, they've got programs in place where they'll come to campuses and work with campuses on these issues. So.
Although they're really backlogged right now. So
I'm sure
yeah.
It exceeds the resource. So.
Yeah.
Pranoti, did you want to add?
So Christy, I heard that the traveling workshop program from NAGT is starting to do that very same thing for the geosciences.
Oh, great.
Yeah, all the leaders from that program are working on being trained themselves, so that could be a thread that you could request from that traveling program series. I was just about to chat that to you, but.
Excellent. That's wonderful to hear.
It might take a few months, but just keep your eye on that, on their announcements.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I see that Hendrada has her hand raised.
Hendrada, was that the earlier question or?
No, it's a new question. I have too many questions. Just stop me when you're ready. So my next question was, do you have any plan in place or any intention to because there's a lot that is already out there. We have a lot of parts of activities and projects and initiatives that are already ongoing in the geoscience space. Do you have any plan to incorporate some of that, coordinate with some of that, so that we don't kind of split our initiatives and ourselves, but maybe more have a cohesive and a coherent kind of initiative going forward? I just wonder.
Yes, and the answer is absolutely yes. That is part of our vision plan, our strategy as we move forward, to not duplicate where things are existing, that we can leverage or amplify those resources and fill in gaps where necessary. But it's certainly not that this is everything you find here will be originated here. One of our goals here is to pull together the best set of curated resources and make those available and promote that engagement and facilitate, not just promote, but facilitate and cultivate that engagement across the geoscience community.
And to add to that, you know, one of the visions for the community of practice is to create a landing spot. That's part of the reason the name is what it is to create a portal, if you will, where people can come and find most everything that they need, where it's not so hard to find things, because there is a sort of landing point, an entry point for people to search for these kinds of resources. So unfortunately, I think, you know, many of us, as I look in the chat section here, I can see some of us have knowledge about one program, some of us have knowledge about another program. And so the sort of need for bringing all of that knowledge into a centralized space. And again, because it's a professional organization, there's a natural link to do that. And so.
Yeah. And if I could add, even in the early discussion, one of the things we've talked about is that in this community practice, there will be people at different stages of awareness and need and knowledge. And how do you make all the materials available, make them accessible for a person wherever they are? So there's some strong scholars out there, and some are on this line, some are advising us, but we're all on this journey. So how do you have materials in that community of practice that are useful and accessible for them, as well as materials for people who are just starting a journey and just may just be what we're calling DEI curious. They want to do something, want to be involved, but they're just now putting their toes into the water. So we want to make it a place where there's a spot for everybody, regardless of where they are, but it's meaningful information and curated and validated information across the spectrum of wherever people are in their stage of awareness and education.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? I see some really great comments in the chat, like Stephanie said. Anybody want to speak up on those, or? Fine if you don't.
I see we have a few people who've sort of jumped in. This is a drop-in session, and they may have not caught all of the information that we shared at the beginning. So certainly if you're joining us now and would like to ask questions about the program, don't feel like you can't ask a question that maybe has been asked before. It's perfectly fine in this session.
I have another question if nobody has a question.
Go ahead, Hendrada.
So I guess my question here is coming back to the cohort of people who are going to recruit. And I think you already talked about the career stage and so forth. And I wanted to kind of revisit motivation and intent, as in, because these usually involve institutions and organizations. I guess one of the things that we don't often say out loud is the motivation why people want to do it, which is like a career boost, as opposed to actually impacting change. And so my question is, how do we I don't know if there's an answer to this, but are there any thoughts about how to filter?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes, lots of thoughts.
Rada, that is,
We've had
yes,
that conversation.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's definitely, yeah, we definitely recognize the need for that. You know, it should not be about us, right? It should not be about personal, you know, glory. As far as how, you know, we've talked about, you know, in the application process, you know, how are we going to, as you said, filter, how are we going to sort of sense that out? If anyone has any good advice on that, we'd be willing to hear it. But I don't know, Stephanie, if you've got any ideas.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we've had some very transparent, frank conversations about this issue, right? How do you ensure that when you're selecting people to participate in what is ultimately a limited resource opportunity, how do you make sure that those resources are going to people who are really ready to engage and committed to the issues, as opposed to this is the next step in my leadership path to move up in my career, right, for the wrong reasons. And performative. We don't want performative participation. So I think the research on how to screen people is pretty clear that there are behavioral interview kinds of techniques that we can use to ask questions about people's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion that will allow us to get a sense of how truly engaged people are before we make decisions about committing resources to support them in the program. But we absolutely hear the question. It resonates with conversations we've already had, and we certainly are going to be attending to that. This is, you know, we want this to be a feather in the cap for the right reasons, not another, you know, badge that somebody wears as a way to perform support as opposed to actually engage.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad you were thinking about it.
Yeah. And so for the selection criteria itself, we will be transparent and post those out when it's fully developed. Well, again, we're still having discussions around that. We'll also be transparent about the selection process. You know, so there's a criteria. So what do you need to apply? What are we looking for? And then and the other portion is the selection process. Is it going to involve interviews? Is it going to be a panel sitting someplace just reviewing stuff on paper? So there's a lot of things to consider, and who's making that selection as well. So who is the selection committee? And also looking at our targets for how, you know, what do we want this first pool of cohorts to look like from a demographic standpoint. So all those things will still be evolved as part of the details that you will see over the next 3 to 6 months before we open up the application process in early summer. I saw a question that came in from Casey about is the predominant target for academic or early career, whatever. And we do think, because it's NSF funded, that first cohort come through will certainly be predominantly academic or federal agency focused. We see this, again, we talk about our vision for this. We see this evolving more broadly than that over time. But in the first 2 cohorts that go through, you will likely see that distribution early on. And as we gain the anticipated additional funding, you'll see us expand our reach for who is involved and who is actually participating in the cohorts portion of the program.
I have another question if nobody has one.
Andrada, you're full of questions. I love it.
I told you, I mean, I really care about this kind of initiative. So my question is from for a different demographic. So we've talked a lot about advanced professionals and the cohort that's going to be recruited for this. And I wonder if there were any thoughts put about how this might trickle down to the undergraduate students in our world.
In terms of what?
In-
Participation?
In terms of engagement, I don't know if participation is the word, but in terms of engagement, because usually people will cycle out of the system, right?
Yeah.
I just wonder if there were any thoughts, maybe how the cohorts might do it, or how.
Yeah.
Were there any
I get
thoughts
you.
about that?
Yeah, I think that could be an angle that some cohorts might take in terms of what is their project, where are they going to have their primary influence. It could be back at some home institution engaging with undergraduates. So we don't know what that is, but that's certainly one way that this could have influence. And Stephanie, you want to add on to that?
Yeah, and I would say that as Billy alluded to, our goal is to try to create the community of practice platform in a way that it's accessible to anyone. And so we certainly would hope that some of the resources we develop there over time would be supportive of the needs of undergraduate students and building and supporting diversity throughout the proverbial pipeline, if you will. And so, we have to start somewhere, and we're trying to start with a focus on academic spaces in particular, and building leadership in those academic spaces first. But where this goes, we hope it turns into a giant bouquet of resources that represents all kinds of needs. And so ultimately, yes, that is a hope. But I suspect that the community of practice resources, even within the first year, will begin to include materials that will be accessible by and useful for students. And there's nothing in the platform that would prevent students from coming in and networking. So the networking tools that we develop will be developed in such a way that people can create their own networking communities within the tool. And that should afford some connections for students as well.
Jill has a great question there in the chat. I don't know.
I see that.
Yeah.
Jill, we've talked about that. So whether the application would require support by an institution. So would there be a requirement if you're self-nominating, for example, what support information you need from your institution? So we've talked about that. I suspect that might be something like that at the end of the day, because I think that's a great indication of the seriousness of not only the individual, but also the institution. So we haven't settled on that quite yet, but certainly that could be one strong indicator. But we have to be careful though in terms of other individuals who, because they come from an institution that really needs it but don't know it. So there's a balancing act in terms of how much weight you put on the institutional support or the strength of the institution or where it is, but I think we have to factor that in as we look at the overall prospect for success and for impact for that individual. Other questions? I'm really glad to see. I mean, these are great questions. Some of you, I mean, Jill, you're already on the advisory group, so we know we're going to hear more from you. But again, I'll say this as well. When we formed the advisory board for this, we had our thinking caps on, and we have a very strong advisory group, but we know there's some gaps there. And I think those gaps are going to be further realized as we go further into the process of the community of practice, the curriculum design, the curriculum development, who's our instructors. So that's something that it's not a static process. And again, in these early stages, we're figuring out what we need. And I think in our engagement with the steering committee and advisory board, we'll look to additional resources to help fill the gaps. And we have had instructions from our AGU leadership to not let any anticipated financial constraints limit our vision at this stage. We want to be practical in the early stages, but as we develop this, then what we see as being the best model for success going forward and bring that forward, although we don't have the money to do, we don't have unlimited resources today, but as we envision what this can be, what this should be, then we don't want to have our visions limited by thinking, oh, that, you know, that costs too much money and we can't afford to do that. Let's articulate that and then see what we can get to match up with that vision. We also want this to be sustainable into the future. So you can't live off grant money. And that's not wise for any organization to try to do that, because we can get down the road and 5 years from now, we might be doing great things, but grant money runs out, boom, everything is dropped. We don't want that to happen. So we will also have a model for sustainability in the future, which means that if we're successful in the first several years of the project activities, I know that there are places where, you know, various institutions might be willing to pay to send their future leaders or emerging leaders or newly selected leaders into this program. So we see a model where this could easily become financially self-sustaining going forward. But to get to that point, we need to make sure we're very successful in the early stages. If we come out kind of half-stepping and sloppy work or whatever, then 5 years from now, no organization is going to be willing, a few organizations will be willing to pay money to send people through this program. So we're envisioning a program that could be a model across STEM.
I have another question.
Go ahead.
All right. So we've talked about the cohort and the community that might benefit. I wonder if there is also some criteria or plan for the facilitators, like who is going to lead and facilitate this initiative?
You mean who are the instructors once we have the curriculum design?
Instructors, facilitators, guides. I don't know what name you'd call them, but yes, the teachers.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, go ahead, Stephanie.
Yeah. So we're fortunate within our advisory board, as well as within our steering committee and core team, to have a good deal of network connections with many programs that have implemented various kinds of DEI programming and efforts. My own background is in social science. I'm a social psychologist by training and spent the first 20 years of my career doing basic social science research on intergroup relations and social cognitive phenomena. So for that side of the science, we've got internal expertise. We also have internal expertise in leadership development, and we have connections in our network to identify good resources. So I feel fairly confident that we'll be able to vet a good roster of instructors and facilitators for this work. Of course, we're always open to hearing people's suggestions, and we would welcome your suggestions if you have ideas for people whom you've seen or interacted with, whom you found value in their lens on this work. So please do share those with us.
No, well, I think my thoughts were just, I hope it's not gonna be like, oh, let's just find geoscientists to do this, because I think it's not about geoscience, even though it's for geoscientists, right? So I thought, so I'm glad to hear that there definitely people with skills about human behavior and human, so that was the point.
Yeah, I mean, there are certainly examples of people who are geoscientists who are deeply knowledgeable about these issues, but our goal is to make a lot more of those people. And the way
I meant because I've been to also events that do focus on DEI, but all the participants and the facilitators are geoscientists first.
Yeah.
Which means that we miss out on the social science, educational, and these other components that are just as valuable. And so that was my point. I'm happy whoever is an expert, but yes, I think it's good to just look at the broad spectrum.
Yeah, and we will. And we do plan to draw heavily from an interdisciplinary approach in developing the roster of instructors and facilitators.
Okay. And Susan, I see you put, Susan Vanderleer, I see you have some information. You want to go ahead and articulate that?
Oh, so yeah, so I think if you are going to ask for support letters from chairs, which was an earlier suggestion, I was going to say make it a choice, whether it is going to be the chair or the director of graduate studies or some other established figure in the department, because not all of those individuals might be supportive, right? Departments are also diverse in the extent to which each individual wants to take action on diversity, equity, and inclusion and how they want to do it. So the students need to have a choice to ask for a letter of support from someone who they know supports them, right? And some students are interested in, for example, in joining this leadership academy, but have an advisor that just wants them to focus on research, 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 and research only. And so, how do we encourage these students, to still lead? I mean, that's a question, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Margaret, do you want to take that, or
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the three of us are thinking about that. I mean, that's something that the four of us, sorry, I was looking at three of us. Yeah, we've definitely thought about this. Absolutely, that's an issue. I think we're thinking the community of practice is a place for them to start. We certainly don't want to hurt any student. We also don't want to prevent them from doing this work that is very close to them and that they feel passionately about. So that's something that we're going to keep in mind and we need to juggle. Maybe some of the other co-PIs have something more substantive to add to that, but we hear you. Thank you.
Yeah, and I see a couple of other questions in the comments box. We'll get to those, but one of the things I'm going to invite you to give us feedback on, and there'll be a formal letter coming from the landing group pretty soon, is that we have not yet selected the evaluator for the project. So if any of you on the line have information about anyone that does project evaluation or assessments that you would recommend we consider, please send that information our way. And you can send it to directly to Stephanie, myself, or anybody on the committee, or you can send it to landing@agu.org. And so it's hard for me to just keep up with the questions in the box. I think I'm missing some things. Jill has comments about the challenge being to translate knowledge into behavior or knowledge into action, or how do you get the impact we can. And I know when we've talked about what the curriculum would be, there's been a lot of discussion around. I know Stephanie had some input on what are our modules or what are our objectives around those type topics. It's not just educating folks, but how do they become change agents? How do they know how to influence change within their own organization? That's part of the curriculum design as well.
I just read a really interesting paper on resistance and diversity resistance, for example, and we plan to include conversations around how do you recognize what it looks like? How do you understand how to address resistance? What are the organizational issues? What are the interpersonal dynamics? What's the psychology of those moments? And so we plan to sort of package it, not just with what do you need to know about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but what do you need to know about how to lead these efforts and make them successful in terms of implementing change. So.
Can I just add to that one of the things that was pretty apparent from the original goal projects is that there are many different styles of leadership. And so, this is going to make it even more challenging for you to figure out how you're going to evaluate these people and what criteria to use, because some people have a different potential style of leadership, and you want to make sure that you can hopefully address, have resources and trainings that can support all avenues for those types of, pathways to leadership. And so it's not just linear. It's more of a chaos.
And Christy has asked, are we aware of any current network of these DEI leaders in STEM? And Christy, I can say I'm not aware. I know there's a network of people addressing harassment through the national academies, but I'm not aware of a group similar to what you're looking for now, except what we're planning here. So if anyone else is aware, because we would want to be aware of that as well, so we can tap into that and help amplify that as well. But I'm coming up short. I don't know whether Pranoti, you were, or Stephanie, or Margaret, or anyone on the call. Oh, it's 9 o'clock. Oh.
I only know of groups that are tied to particular initiatives, so cohorts that did this particular program or that program, but not a group across the board, I think.
Yeah, there's a group involved currently that's a self-formed looking at addressing systemic racism in the geosciences, and it's been informal, but they've been very proactive, and it's set up a series of webinars, and we'll look at how we can help support and amplify that work as well going forward. It's the top of the hour, and we're not supposed to run long. I'm very pleased with the discussion we've had this morning. It's been very rich, very helpful, very productive. So would encourage any of you on the line to please write to us, call us, email us with any additional questions or input you might have. Again, our aim here is to make this, first of all, we want to be transparent with the community, but we always want this to be as successful as it possibly can. And we need all of your ideas and inputs and views to make sure that happens. So thank you for being here, and enjoy the rest of the meeting. Thanks again. Thanks, folks.